What would you do if the lines between duty and desire blurred so deeply that you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began? Pause. This is not just a BL webtoon fantasy, not just another yaoi manhwa love story. It's a tale about family, sacrifice, and the dangerous beauty of love that blooms where it shouldn't. Welcome to today's story. My sister's marriage fell apart, and I had to marry her husband, only to find out he liked me. From the very beginning, Junho lived in someone else's shadow. His sister, Ji-eun, had always been the bright one, the adored daughter, the woman who commanded attention when she entered a room. Next to her, Junho was quiet, unassuming, too soft-spoken for the harsh world around him. While Ji-eun married into wealth and security, Junho stayed behind, the son who kept the house in order, the one relatives forgot during family gatherings. And yet, when her marriage to Min-jae crumbled, it wasn't Ji-eun who bore the weight of scandal. It was Junho who was pulled into its aftermath. Min-jae was not an easy man to ignore, a figure of control and elegance, tall, sharp-eyed, with a reputation that demanded respect. His business empire thrived, his words carried authority, his presence turned rooms silent. To most, he was untouchable. But behind that commanding exterior was a man trapped by expectations, crushed beneath the duty of family name, alliances, and obligations that dictated his every move. His marriage to Ji-eun had been less about love and more about power, a deal, a transaction dressed in ceremony. And when Ji-eun walked away, Min-jae was left with both shame and emptiness. But tradition, cruel as it was, dictated something else. The union between the families could not dissolve so easily. To preserve it, another had to take Ji-eun's place. And in the hushed whispers of elders, in the binding rules of contracts, one name surfaced: Junho. It wasn't supposed to be real, it wasn't supposed to mean anything, just paper, just signatures, just a continuation of the arrangement that bound two families together. That was all it was meant to be. Junho told himself this as he stood in front of the mirror on the morning of the ceremony. The suit felt heavy on his shoulders, heavier than anything he had ever worn, as though the fabric itself carried the weight of expectation. His sister's absence clung to the air like a ghost. Ji-eun had been the one chosen, the daughter whose marriage was meant to secure alliances and protect family honor. But when her union with Min-jae shattered, it was Junho, quiet, invisible Junho, who was asked to step in. He told himself it was survival, that he was protecting his family from ruin, that if he endured the coldness of a marriage built on necessity, then maybe, one day, his parents would look at him with something other than disappointment. He had always been the background figure, the boy no one noticed, the one who blended into silence. And now, suddenly, he was center stage in a performance he never auditioned for. And yet, the moment Min-jae's eyes met his across the ceremonial hall, something shifted. Junho had expected disdain. He had expected indifference. But what he saw was something else, something unreadable, dangerous. Min-jae's gaze wasn't cruel. It wasn't even dismissive. It lingered, steady and assessing, as though searching for pieces of Junho he didn't even know existed. That was the beginning of the betrayal, not Min-jae's, not anyone else's, his own heart. The first nights in Min-jae's house were suffocating. The mansion was too big, too polished, its echoing hallways making Junho feel even smaller than he already did. He moved carefully, as though afraid to disturb the perfect order of things. Min-jae, for his part, was polite, but distant. He spoke in clipped tones, offered no unnecessary conversation. Their meals were quiet affairs, silverware clinking, glasses setting down, silence filling every corner. Junho told himself he could live like this, that it was better this way. Distance meant safety. Distance meant he could protect his heart. But Minjae made it impossible, because Minjae, even in his silence, noticed things. He noticed when Junho struggled with the strap of his bag, stepping in to adjust it without a word. He noticed when Junho left his tea half finished, replacing it with the blend he preferred the next morning. He noticed when Junho fell asleep on the couch, and instead of waking him, draped a blanket over his shoulders. Tiny gestures, almost invisible, but to Junho, they were earthquakes. For someone who had spent his whole life fading into the background, to be seen, even in such small, subtle ways, was terrifying. Terrifying, because it made something grow inside him that he had no right to feel. At first, Junho tried to rationalize it. Minjae was a considerate man, nothing more. This was duty, not affection, a continuation of the arrangement. But then, there were the moments when Minjae's gaze lingered too long, the moments when his voice softened just slightly, when he said Junho's name, the moments when their hands brushed accidentally, and Minjae didn't immediately pull away. Those moments were not duty, they were not obligation, they were something else, and Junho felt himself breaking. One night, unable to sleep, Junho wandered into the living room. The storm outside beat against the windows, rain spilling down like endless tears. Minjae was already there, seated on the couch, his tie undone, his shirt collar open. His hair was damp, his sleeves rolled up. He looked different. Not the untouchable man who commanded boardrooms and households alike, but human, tired, vulnerable. Junho froze in the doorway, his heart pounding so loudly he was sure Minjae could hear it. "You should be asleep," Minjae said without looking up, his voice low and steady. "I couldn't," Junho admitted softly. His voice felt fragile in the large room, like it might shatter if he spoke too loudly. Minjae finally looked at him. His eyes, dark and sharp, softened as they settled on Junho. The weight of that gaze made it hard to breathe. For a moment, neither of them moved. The storm filled the silence, but it wasn't enough to drown the electricity sparking between them. "Why do you always do that?" Minjae asked suddenly. Junho blinked, startled. "Do what?" "Make yourself smaller." Minjae leaned back, his eyes never leaving Junho's. "As if you don't deserve to take up space. As if you're just waiting for the world to forget you." The words struck deep, cutting through years of practiced invisibility. Junho's throat tightened. "I don't know how to be any other way," he whispered. Minjae stood then, his movements slow, deliberate. He crossed the room with the quiet authority of someone who always knew exactly where he was going. And when he stopped in front of Junho, close enough that Junho could feel the warmth radiating from his body, he reached out. His fingers tilted Junho's chin up, forcing his gaze to meet his. "Then let me show you," Minjae said. The world tilted, Junho's breath caught, and then Minjae's lips were on his. It wasn't a soft kiss. It wasn't hesitant. It was fierce, breaking through walls Junho didn't even know he had built. His hands trembled as they clutched at Minjae's shirt, pulling him closer, unable to resist the gravity that had been pulling them together since the beginning. The storm raged outside, but inside something else raged too, something Junho couldn't deny anymore from that night forward, the marriage that wasn't supposed to be real became something else entirely. It wasn't simple. It wasn't perfect. There were arguments, silences heavy with unspoken fears, moments where the shadow of Ji-un's name loomed over them. But there was also laughter. There were quiet breakfasts shared in soft light. There were evenings spent reading in the same room, the silence comfortable instead of suffocating. There were touches, hesitant at first, then bolder, more certain. Junho began to see himself through Min-jae's eyes, not as a shadow, not as a replacement, but as someone worthy of standing in the light. And Min-jae, bound for so long by duty, began to allow himself to choose, to want, to desire. Their love was complicated, messy, filled with ghosts of the past. But it was theirs. And for the first time, Junho wasn't just surviving. He was living, because it wasn't supposed to be real. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. But it did. It meant everything. The first nights were suffocating. The house, grand and echoing, felt like a prison. Junho moved like a guest in his own life, careful, restrained. Min-jae, though polite, was distant, his words clipped, his tone formal. They ate dinners in silence. They passed each other like strangers bound only by obligation, and yet, even in that silence, Junho felt the weight of Min-jae's gaze, not harsh, not dismissive, something else, something unreadable, dangerous. Days turned into weeks, and in those weeks, something began to shift. Min-jae was attentive in ways Junho wasn't prepared for. He adjusted the strap of his bag when it slipped from his shoulder. He set aside Junho's favorite snacks without needing to be asked. One night, when Junho had fallen asleep on the couch with a book open in his lap, Min-jae quietly draped a blanket over him. Small gestures, almost invisible. But to Junho, starved of acknowledgement his whole life, they felt like storms breaking across a dry desert. The quiet halls of the house became charged. Every accidental touch, every glance that lingered too long, every silent stretch taut with possibility. It all began to unravel Junho's defenses. He told himself it was impossible, that Min-jae was simply being kind, that this was just duty. But the truth clawed at him every night as he lay awake. Min-jae wasn't looking at him out of pity. He wasn't obligated to care. There was something else in those eyes, in the way his voice softened when he spoke Junho's name. Something Junho had longed for and feared to believe. It began on a night when the skies broke open, releasing a torrent of rain that felt endless. The kind of rain that blurred the world outside, that pressed against the windows with a relentless rhythm, drowning out everything else. Junho sat curled on the couch, a book resting on his lap. His eyes traced the same sentence again and again, but the words refused to sink in. His mind wasn't in the story. It was across the room. Min-jae had just returned home. His shirt clung slightly at the shoulders, damp from the storm. His collar was undone, a rare sight for a man who lived in pressed suits and immaculate order. The sleeves of his dress shirt were rolled carelessly to his elbows, exposing strong forearms, veins visible beneath the skin. His hair, usually styled with precision, was mussed, a few wet strands falling across his forehead. There was something unbearably human about him like this. Not the unshakable figure everyone else saw, not the aloof, disciplined man Junho had sworn he could endure without feeling. But Min-jae, stripped of armor, Min-jae unguarded, and Junho couldn't look away. His heart thudded against his ribs, harder, louder, betraying him. He told himself to stop staring, to bury his face back in the book, but the temptation was too strong, the ache too deep. His eyes betrayed him, drinking in every detail, the shadow of stubble on Minjae's jaw, the way his broad shoulders moved as he set down his briefcase, the small, almost invisible sigh of exhaustion that slipped past his lips, and then it happened. Minjae's gaze lifted. His eyes met Junho's. The world stopped. For a moment, there was only the sound of rain hammering the glass, the hum of blood in Junho's ears. He expected Minjae to glance away, to dismiss him as he always did. But he didn't. Minjae held his gaze, steady, unreadable, like he was trying to unravel a secret buried deep within him. Seconds stretched like an eternity. Junho's chest tightened. Heat crawled up his neck. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. Something tethered him there, in that unspoken exchange. The book slipped from his lap, landing on the floor with a soft thud. Neither of them moved to pick it up. Finally, Minjae spoke. His voice was low, roughened by a fatigue or something else. "You've been staring." The words landed like a stone in Junho's stomach. Panic surged, his throat closed up. He opened his mouth, but no excuse came. No denial, no deflection, just silence, heavy and damning. Minjae didn't look away. He leaned back in his chair, eyes still fixed on him, and for the first time, Junho didn't see indifference. He saw awareness, curiosity, maybe even a flicker of something dangerously close to desire. The rain roared louder, pressing in like a witness. Junho's hands curled into fists against the fabric of the couch. He tried to steady his breathing, but it was useless. Every part of him was trembling, not from fear, but from the unbearable weight of being seen, truly seen. "What were you thinking?" Minjae asked at last, softer this time. The sharp edges in his tone had dulled, leaving something more intimate. Junho shook his head quickly, too quickly. "Nothing." Minjae arched an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. He rose from his chair, each step deliberate, echoing in the silence between them. He stopped just in front of the couch, close enough that Junho had to tilt his head back to meet his gaze. The sight stole his breath. Minjae standing over him like this, shadows from the lamplight tracing across his face, made him look devastatingly handsome, impossibly unreachable, and yet so close. Junho swallowed hard, pulse racing. He wanted to vanish, he wanted to confess, he wanted both, and neither, and everything in between. "You think I don't notice," Minjae said quietly, his voice almost drowned by the rain. "The way you look at me." Junho froze, his chest constricted, his lungs refusing to work. Shame burned through him, hot and suffocating. He thought he had been careful. He thought his feelings were hidden, buried beneath duty and silence. I didn't mean," Junho stammered, but the words crumbled as soon as they left his lips. Minjae didn't let him finish. He lowered himself, kneeling so their eyes were level. His gaze softened, though his intensity didn't fade. "Then tell me," he whispered, his face only inches away. "What do you mean?" Junho's vision blurred with unshed tears. He had rehearsed 1,000 lies in his head, 1,000 ways to survive this arrangement. But faced with Minjae's eyes, with the storm raging outside, every defense shattered. "I don't know how to stop," Junho confessed, the words spilling out before he could stop them. His voice shook, raw and desperate. "I don't know how to stop feeling like this." The silence that followed was deafening. Junho braced himself for rejection, for coldness, for the cruel reminder that this was just a contract, just necessity, nothing more. But Minjae didn't move away. Instead, he reached out, slowly, deliberately, and brushed a damp strand of hair from Junho's forehead. The touch was feather-light, almost hesitant, but it sent a shiver racing down his spine. You think you're the only one, Minjae murmured, his voice low, rough, almost pained. Junho's breath caught. His eyes widened, searching Minjae's face for the lie. But there was none. Minjae's expression cracked, the mask of control slipping. I tried to ignore it, to bury it. But every time I look at you, every time I hear your voice, it gets harder. The air between them trembled, charged with something electric. Junho's lips parted, 1,000 words fighting to escape, but none made it out. His heart was too loud, his thoughts too tangled. And then Minjae closed the distance. His lips pressed against Junho's, firm, searching, desperate. The world dissolved, the rain, the storm, the weight of the past, all of it melted into nothing. There was only the warmth of Minjae's mouth, the rough edge of his breath, the undeniable truth of the moment. Junho clung to him, fingers curling into his shirt, pulling him closer. It was messy, trembling, too fast and too hesitant at once, but it was real, terrifyingly, beautifully real. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Minjae's forehead rested against his, their breaths mingling in the charged silence. This wasn't supposed to happen, Minjae whispered. I know, Junho breathed, tears spilling down his cheeks, but it did. Minjae cupped his face, thumbs brushing away the tears. His touch was tender in a way that shattered Junho completely. It did, Minjae echoed, as if sealing the truth between them. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, something fragile and undeniable had been born, something neither of them could ignore any longer. Why do you always do that? Minjae's voice was low, steady. Junho startled. Do what? Make yourself smaller. As if you don't deserve to be seen. Minjae leaned forward, eyes sharp, but not unkind. You're here. You're my partner. Stop acting like you're invisible. The words cut deep, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. For so long, Junho had survived by fading into the background, but here was Minjae, dragging him into the light. The silence stretched, and before Junho could stop himself, the truth slipped out, barely a whisper. I don't know how. Minjae stood, slow, deliberate. He crossed the room, each step echoing against the storm outside until he stood before Junho. His hand reached out, not forceful but steady, lifting Junho's chin until their eyes met. Then let me show you. The moment fractured the world. Junho's breath caught, his chest tight with fear and longing, and then Minjae kissed him. Not softly, not hesitantly, but with years of restraint breaking free all at once. Junho's hands trembled as they gripped Minjae's shirt, pulling him closer, unable to resist the gravity that had been pulling them together all along. The storm raged outside, but inside something else broke open, something neither could deny anymore. From that night forward, their marriage was no longer just a facade. It was complicated, messy, haunted by the ghosts of Jiun and the disapproval of family. But it was theirs. They learned each other's rhythms, their wounds, their fears. Minjae softened in Junho's presence, revealing the man behind the mask. Junho grew braver, daring to exist, daring to demand, daring to love. It wasn't perfect. There were arguments, insecurities, the lingering guilt of how it had all begun. But there was also laughter in the kitchen, warmth in shared glances, comfort in the quiet moments when words weren't needed. Junho, once invisible in his sister's shadow, found himself seen, truly seen for the first time. Minjae, once bound by duty, discovered the freedom of choosing desire, of choosing love. Together, they built something fragile, but real, something worth fighting for. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Because sometimes love doesn't wait for the right time, the right person, the right permission. Sometimes it crashes in, uninvited, rewriting the rules, demanding to be felt. And though their story began with brokenness, it grew into something whole. Softly, their marriage, once an arrangement, became a home. And that is the story of Junho and Minjai. Tell me in the comments, what did you feel while listening? Heartbroken, sweet, emotional, cute? I want to know your reaction. And don't forget, subscribe for more BL Webtoon and Yaoi Manhwa story breakdowns, and check the description for full story links and recommendations. Because in the end, love stories like these remind us, messy or perfect, forbidden or free, love is always worth telling.